Imagine paying dues for years, and still being told you can't so much as park in your own driveway. Then the HOA president kicks in your cabin door, while you're shaking hands with the state's top prosecutor. What would you even do? Freeze fight, or, just watch her crash and burn. My name's Rex Holloway. After a bruised-up divorce, I moved into the place my granddad built by hand on the north bend of Lakeshore Pines, Michigan. 2.5 acres of cedar and shoreline, where the morning mist sits low and the loons talk like old friends. If you ever ran your fingers along hand-hewn cedar that still smells like sawdust and Old Spice, you know what I'm saying. That cabin wasn't just lumber, it was legacy. It was the dock Grandpa set, with a mason's patience. The fish stories that got taller every Thanksgiving. The char marks on the fire pit from nights I thought would never end. Then Karen happened. Karen Whitmore, late 50s. Pressed khakis sharp enough to shave with. Plastic smile that never reached her eyes. She chaired the Lakeshore Pines Homeowners Association with a clipboard clamped to her chest like a medieval shield. She drove a spotless silver SUV with HOA official magnets stuck like warning labels. She had a tape measure on her belt the way sheriffs used to carry revolvers. And she patrolled. Oh, she patrolled. Her first courtesy notice had no joke, 47 violations. 47. My dock was supposedly 3 feet too long. My fire pit was labeled an unpermitted combustion structure. The cedar shakes on the cabin were aesthetic deviations. I had a bird feeder encouraging vermin. There were fines listed in a column, the length of a bad day, $500 to start. Then $75 for every day I failed to cure. When I reminded her the cabin was built decades before the HOA even existed, she tipped her head, smile like a paper cut. Previous ownership is irrelevant, Mr. Holloway, she said. All properties within jurisdiction must comply. You have 30 days. After that, we file a lien, a line, on the place my granddad raised with calloused hands and a coffee can of roofing nails. Something in me snapped. I drove to the county building and started digging through dusty ledgers and PDFs printed on paper that felt tired. What I found made my palms go cold. The HOA's formation paperwork had been filed months after Grandpa passed signed. Supposedly, by him. Same shaky cursive, same looping H. Only problem, the notary stamp belonged to the developer's son, who just happened to be sitting on the current board. Not a clerical oops. A scheme. I went home mad and, honestly, a little scared. But I'm a veteran. I know the difference between panic and a plan. I installed cameras. Quiet ones. I set notifications to ping my phone. I started a folder labeled HOA Evidence. I kept a spiral notebook on the counter. Dates. Times. Who said what. You know. All the boring things that become gold when the truth finally matters. A week later, at exactly 6:30 in the morning, Karen marched onto my property with a lanky surveyor and the local tire guy, Dale Pritchard. Karen barked measurements. The surveyor trotted after her, tapping a metal rod into the soil like he was fencing with ghosts. Dale trailed them with the look of a man who'd give a month's wages to be invisible. They circled the cabin, snapped photos through my windows, and poked at my dock pilings like raccoons testing a latch. That afternoon, the surveyor Jimmy Kowalski came back alone and stood on my porch with his hat in his hands. She only paid me half and told me to, find violations, he muttered. Said if I didn't, she'd ruin my license. Help me get my money and I'll testify. 2 nights later, My camera caught Jimmy behind my shed, relieving himself into the pine straw. When Karen heard, she threatened to file a health code complaint. I told her she might want to explain to the county why she'd hired him in the first place. She bristled, then doubled down with a thicker stack of fines and an intent to sue. $12,000. She also pushed the board to temporarily shut down my dock pending compliance. It was power for power's sake. And she was drunk on it. She started running her mouth at Murphy's Diner, telling folks I was an unstable veteran who didn't respect authority. That one hit like a sucker punch. You can say I've got messy hair or my yard needs raking, but you don't smear my service. Defamation, I thought, and scribbled it in the notebook with a hand that shook. I hired an attorney out of Grand Rapids, a woman named Stella Crawford with kind eyes and a spine of steel, over a chipped mug of diner coffee. She listened without blinking. Michigan has what's basically private attorney general statutes, she said. When you uncover systemic fraud that hurts a community, you can sue on behalf of everyone. Treble damages. Injunctive relief. The works. She slid her glasses down. Also, your cabin predates their covenants. Their rules likely don't even bind you. But we prove that with deeds. Surveys. Title. History facts. Not shouting. We filed a counterclaim, fraudulent formation, harassment, abusive process. And then, this is how bullies lose. The neighbors started talking. Martha, across the road, told me Karen forced her to rip out her husband's memorial rose garden because the petals clashed with the community palette. Tom, an Afghanistan vet with a limp and a soft laugh, whispered he'd never been more rattled by anyone in his life. A young couple said their twins' chalk drawings counted as graffiti. There's people who can ignore this stuff. I ain't one of them. Stories kept coming. A widow fined because her wind chimes exceeded decibel guidelines. A retiree told to remove a flag because the pole was 3 inches too tall. A teacher warned that her unauthorized little free library would be treated as litter. The more we shared, the clearer it became. Karen targeted whoever she thought couldn't or wouldn't fight back. Then, money started smelling wrong. Stella and I requested financials. The HOA bank statements shuffled in like reluctant witnesses. $67,000 sat labeled, Vendor Services, Whitmore Management. Karen's company. A company that best anyone could tell had never managed so much as a tool shed. Checks out to cash. Charges at a riverfront casino. A month of consulting that matched her son's failed restaurant launch. My chest got tight. People were skipping prescriptions to pay these dues. And Karen was spinning the wheel. I installed more cameras. I upgraded the floodlights. I saved every letter. One night, just before midnight, my camera captured Karen in pink gardening gloves sneaking along my fence with a trash bag. She scattered something behind my septic tank and scurried off. The next morning, an anonymous environmental complaint hit the county office. A kindly inspector showed up, sniffed the air, and lifted a brow. Smells like last night's fish fry from Murphy's, he said, tapping the bag with his boot. Who would pull a stunt like that? I didn't answer. My camera already had. We kept building the file. Jimmy's brother, Danny, working as a private investigator on the side, handed me a recording of Karen saying, "Find something or make it up. I'll pay a bonus if it sticks." I played it for Stella, and she looked like a storm rolling over water. "This isn't just civil," she said. "This is criminal." Karen made a false police report, claiming I'd threatened her using specialized military skills. The officer who took it came by looking apologetic. I poured him a coffee and showed him the footage. The timestamps. The letters. He flipped through my spiral notebook, whistled low, and said, "Keep documenting." He tapped the binder of financials. "And keep that locked." Karen tried to bribe the county inspector. The inspector reported it. Karen called my ex-wife to say I was unstable. My ex hung up on her and texted me, "You okay?" Karen paid a teenager $50 to pour motor oil by my dock. The kid confessed to his mom. Then to me. I didn't yell. I gave him a broom and a promise. Do right now and I'll remember that. Local Channel 7 rolled into my driveway because Karen pitched them a story about a dangerous homeowner terrorizing the neighborhood. I opened my door to the reporter and laid out the binders like I was setting a table, videos cued. Letters tabbed. Statements highlighted. The segment that aired wasn't the witch hunt Karen wanted. It was a wake-up call titled, "When HOAs Go Too Far." The Attorney General's office called the next day. Investigation opened. Witness interview scheduled. They set a meeting at my cabin on a Tuesday in late spring, when the birch leaves were tight and pale, and the lake carried the sound of boat ropes squeaking against cleats. I swept the porch. Martha brought brownies. Tom offered to stand watch at the road like a one-man honor guard. I mean, probably not necessary. I told him. He grinned. "Humor me. You ever feel the air change before a storm that morning? Had that feeling charged and oddly quiet." The Attorney General herself, Elena Santos, arrived in a navy blazer and boots meant for real ground. She shook my hand, glanced over the water, and said, "Nice place to tell the truth." We were walking through the timeline, me, Stella, and the AG, when the cabin door rattled. It didn't just knock. It blew inward on its hinges and banged the wall. Karen exploded into the room. Clipboard up like a badge. "Immediate compliance inspection," she shouted. "You've erected a non-compliant structure on the south edge." She froze. The badge on the AG's belt caught the morning light. Elena Santos didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ma'am," she said, "you just committed breaking and entering in front of the chief law enforcement officer of this state. Please step outside and wait while we discuss your criminal exposure." Karen's face went the color of skim milk. I was invited," she stammered. "No," I said. "You weren't." "Outside," the AG repeated. "Now." Karen backed out, bumping the doorframe with her shoulder. We could hear her breathing on the porch. Short and sharp. Inside. Stella slid a folder across the table to the AG. "Formation fraud," she said. "Embezzlement. Witness intimidation. Here's the ledger analysis. Vendor payouts. And the deed history on Rex's property. His cabin predates the covenants. He was never subject to them." I set Grandpa's original deed, kept in a fireproof pouch, tucked beneath his old fishing medals on the table like an anchor. The survey map showed the property line stretching a good 40 feet further east than the HOA had ever admitted, right underneath Karen's private rose garden and gazebo gifted to the community. I could practically hear Grandpa chuckle, "Son, looks like your shoreline grew overnight." Stella nodded at the door. "Ready." The AG stepped out first. "Miss Whitmore," she said, "we've received credible evidence that you directed contractors to fabricate violations, attempted to bribe a county official, filed a false police report, and misappropriated tens of thousands of dollars in HOA funds into your own shell entity. We also have reason to believe the HOA's creation documents were forged. You should retain counsel. Karen's chin jutted. This is harassment, she snapped. This man, she jabbed her pen at me, has undermined our community for years. The AG didn't blink. We also have you on video, planting fish remains by Mr. Holloway's septic field. Please do not speak until you have an attorney. Karen reached for the doorknob like it might steady her. And that was the moment, call it, a holy silence, when I realized the tide had turned. Bullies are fearless until there's a bigger room and brighter lights. Word travels in small towns the way smoke travels through pine. By that afternoon, neighbors I'd only waved to were showing up with printouts, check registers, screenshots. Martha brought a folder of emails in which Karen had called her a sentimental distraction to property values. Tom limped in with pictures of his flag at half-mast the week his buddy took his own life. Karen had ordered him to remove it because the pole was non-conforming. A single mom arrived with a stack of violation letters issued while she was working double shifts at the hospital. If you folks need a sworn statement, she said, I'll raise my right hand right now. Stella formed working groups at my dining table, like a field commander. Financials to the left, witnesses in the living room, property and deed research on the porch. I brewed coffee until the pot hissed. Tom set up a fan. Someone brought pizza. The room didn't feel like a war room. It felt like a barn, raising neighbors, lifting the truth until it stood on its own. That evening, Channel 7 returned with a follow-up. Karen declined to comment on advice of counsel. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. I asked Martha to stand at the back with a notepad. Her memory is like a tape recorder. We walked in. Side by side, the veterans, the teacher, the widow, the young couple with chalk on their shoes. Karen's chair at the head table sat empty. Her nameplate tilted. Dale Pritchard opened and closed his mouth like a porch toad. The developer's son avoided our eyes and shuffled papers on purpose. We spoke not in anger, not in chaos, just in facts. Deed dates and bank transfers. The way fines landed hardest on the people least able to pay. The aesthetic rules that managed to exempt favored friends. The board didn't vote that night. They couldn't. Too many eyes. Too many cameras. But the room felt like a scale settling back to center. The next morning, before sunrise, unmarked cars rolled into Lakeshore Pines. Agents stepped out wearing windbreakers with big federal letters that made everyone swallow hard. Karen and Dale were led across their lawns in handcuffs. Faces pale and tight. I didn't cheer. I just leaned against my porch post and felt the knot between my shoulders start to loosen for the first time in, well, a long time. I wish I could tell you it all ended right there. But life ain't tidy. There was discovery. Depositions. A hearing where my granddad's deed was entered into the record, and the judge looked at Karen over his glasses like she was smoke in a no-smoking room. There were whispers and cold shoulders from a few folks who thought HOA power was the same as order. Forgiveness would come later. Accountability had to come first. While the criminal case inched forward, the neighborhood took stock, not of flower colors or hedge heights, but of what community actually means. Martha replanted her roses, not as a memorial trapped behind a picket fence, but as a shared garden with a little wooden sign Tom burned with his pocket knife. In loving memory, come sit. The young couple turned the graffiti chalk drawings into a Saturday thing. Kids from 3 streets over showed up with buckets of pastel. And even the grump who used to hiss about scooter wheels rolled a hopscotch square and tossed a pebble onto 8. We found out where the money went, most of it. Casinos don't write sympathy notes. Karen's son's restaurant had folded after 3 months of great fries and terrible bookkeeping. A chunk of consulting bought patio furniture for Karen's HOA office, which turned out to be her screened-in back porch. Stella built a restitution plan that looked like a math teacher's dream columns. Footnotes. Escrow. It wasn't revenge. It was repair. One afternoon, while combing through old file boxes in Grandpa's shed, I found a mason jar of screws, 2 yellowed Polaroids of him and Grandma holding base the size of toddlers, and a folded envelope with boundary "Keep" penciled on it. Inside was a survey from the 1960s with hand-drawn arrows and his initials in blue pen. The line marked "East Setback" ran straight through what was now Karen's rose garden. I touched the ink and felt sorry. Hard to explain. Like his hand was still on my shoulder. I took the survey inside and laid it on the table beside the deed. Legacy isn't a word you brag about. It's the quiet thing that keeps you from selling out for easy. The day the judge dissolved the HOA and appointed a receiver was slow like a Sunday. The clerk read the order in a monotone that still felt like music. Restitution, accounting, injunctions against further collection. A specific finding that the covenants had never bound my property and that the formation itself was tainted by fraud. Stella squeezed my elbow so I wouldn't say something dumb like, "Hallelujah." Though I was thinking it beside a deep, bone-level breath, Karen pleaded to a stack of charges. The judge spelled out a prison term measured in years, not months. I won't name the number because some folks will say it was too much and others not nearly enough. What mattered to me was the moment Karen looked over her shoulder toward the gallery like she expected an ally to stand. No one did. That's the thing about power held wrong. It evaporates the second the lights come up. In the weeks after, quiet settled over Lakeshore Pines. Not the creepy quiet of people scared to speak, but the good kind, the hush before the singer hits the note. We redirected what used to be fight energy into fix energy. Tom suggested Veterans Fishing Saturdays on my dock. Martha offered to handle the sign-ups on a clipboard that didn't bite. The chalk drawing kids painted a sign for the community compost pile, the soil made from Karen's old rose garden trimmings, turned with fallen leaves and coffee grounds from Murphy's. Nourish together. The sign read in wobbly letters. If you're wondering about me in all this, whether I held on or burned out, I'll be straight. There were nights I stared at the ceiling and counted the knots in the pine. There were mornings I drank coffee on the steps and couldn't taste it. I caught myself checking the cameras more than made sense. Healing isn't a switch. It's more like sanding slow, messy, revealing the grain. My daughter came home from college for a weekend and stepped onto the dock with her sneakers off so she could feel the boards with her feet. "You did good, Dad," she said. "I mean, maybe you overdo the security lights," she teased. "But you did good." We sat with our calves in the water and watched ripples push the sunlight into coins. I kept thinking about the first day Grandpa brought me here. He put my hands on a post-hole digger and said, "You want something to last. You said it straight, and you said it deep." Back then I thought he meant fence posts. Now I know he meant everything. Set your lines with truth. Set your promises so they don't wobble. Set your pride aside when the neighbor kid needs help. Set your boots where they belong when a bully shows up with a tape measure and a smirk. People ask if I hate HOAs now. Nah. Rules ain't evil. A community needs agreements. But power without transparency, that turns neighbors into suspects and porches into outposts. I've met boards that serve like deacons, quiet, fair, grateful to be asked. And I've met Karen. Same structure, different soul. A month after the dissolution order, The receiver mailed out restitution checks. They weren't big. They were honest. Martha cried over hers, not because of the dollars, but because it felt like someone wrote, "We saw what happened" on a line that mattered. Tom framed the letter that said his flag had never been in violation. The young couple put their check on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a slice of watermelon. "We'll use it for chalk." They laughed. We held a potluck on the point under the cottonwoods. I grilled bratwurst while 15 kids darted between coolers and fishing rods. Someone brought a carrot salad with raisins the size of nickels. We told stories about the time the dock floated away during a storm and we caught it with kayak paddles. About the winter the pump froze and Grandpa thawed it with a hairdryer and a prayer. About Karen's clipboard and how none of us ever wanted to see another checklist that long. Except maybe a grocery list. Martha joked. "Yeah," Tom said. "A long one." Late that night, after the last cooler slammed and engines faded, I stood alone where the grass gives up to sand. The lake breathed. A barred owl asked, "Who cooks for you?" I thought about justice and what it really is. Not a trophy. Not the other side's humiliation. It's a level step where your foot doesn't roll. It's kids drawing spaceships on the asphalt without anyone scolding them about property values. It's a widow planting roses in memory because grief deserves petals, not paperwork. It's a flag moving in wind that belongs to nobody and everybody at once. Some mornings I find myself flipping through the old spiral notebook. The entries turn from fear to facts to, eventually, gratitude. The last page isn't a violation log. It's names. Martha. Tom. The single mom, whose name I'll keep off because privacy matters. The kid who poured the oil and then stayed to scrub it out. Jimmy, the surveyor, who told the truth, even though it cost him short-term comfort. Danny, with the scratchy audio that landed like a gavel. Stella, who kept us from mistaking anger for strategy. The AG, who walked into my kitchen like justice wears boots. If you've got a Karen in your neighborhood, I won't tell you it's easy. I won't even tell you it's quick. But I'll tell you, this bullies build cardboard castles. They look tall until it rains. Document. Breathe. Ask for help. Share your story. Even if your voice shakes at first. And when you find that envelope marked boundary, keep whatever that is in your life, open it. Hold the line with quiet hands. I keep one more thing on that dock. Now a simple wooden bench with a brass plate that reads, "For the next person who needs a seat. Veterans come on Saturdays. Kids fish with bread balls on Sundays. On Tuesdays, Martha runs what she calls Rose Therapy, where folks bring clippings and coffee and talk about husbands, heartbreak, and new starts." Tom swears the bass bite better when there's laughter on the shore. I believe him. Karen's old rose garden is the compost heap that feeds Martha's new roses. That detail honestly makes me smile in a way I can't hide. Trash to soil, wrong to right. It ain't poetic justice. It's practical. You work the rot back into the earth until it gives life. Every so often, a stranger messages me because they saw the television piece or heard about the case through a friend of a friend. They're worried. They've got a notice on their door that reads like a threat letter. They're scared of the late fees stacking up like bricks they can't climb. I tell them what Stella told me, facts, not shouting. Then I tell them what Grandpa told me, said it straight and said it deep. I also say, don't forget to drink water and eat real meals. Because stress makes fools of the best of us. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if you've ever had an HOA, Try to turn your home into a chessboard where you're a pawn on their file cabinet. I'm gonna say the quiet thing out loud. You're not crazy for being angry. Anger ain't the problem. What you do with it is build something. A case. A garden. A Saturday morning tradition. Build the thing that lasts after the bully's clipboard is just a joke in a drawer somewhere. One last picture for you to hold sunrise on Lakeshore Pines. The water is copper for a minute before it turns blue. A loon calls. And the sound slides along the surface like a skater. My daughter sits beside me. Toes in the water. Coffee steaming between her hands. The dock is steady. The line is true. The place stands because people stood. Justice didn't just arrive. It took root. So what would you do if your HOA nightmare crashed into your living room and tried to take your life apart, plank by plank? Would you back down? Or would you set your feet and make your stand? Anyone else had an HOA pull this kind of stunt on you? Tell me in the comments. 'Cause the next person who needs courage might be reading what you write today.